Thank you. I'm very grateful to them for agreeing to help with organizing this series of workshops.
It was really fun.
Just let Mary do what she's doing.
Yeah, fine.
And there's Megan.
Okay, so, and I would like to thank our sponsors. So as I mentioned, it's Russian East European Institute at Indiana University, also the Center for Russian, East European and Eurasian Studies at the University of Pittsburgh, and Slavic and Eurasian Language Resource Center at Duke University. And Evgeny and Irina, it's your turn.
All right, thank you, Olga. And I would like to invite you to the webinar, which will be led by Olga and our colleague Izolda Savinkova this Friday, which will be on the topic of diversity and authentic materials, authentic resources. So please join us for this webinar as well. Yes, thank you, Olga, for organizing this. Thank you for this endless energy that you have, and that's always an inspiration. And I would like to thank all the ACTR members for being part of ACTR, for supporting the organization, for being this, wonderful collective of like-minded people. And it's really a pleasure and honor to be a part of this organization. So thank you. And I would like to thank my partner in crime, Irina Dubinina, a longtime friend and a colleague, co-author of Родная речь, a new textbook for heritage speakers that came out in 2019, I believe, and also co-editor of the new volume on teaching Russian, art of teaching Russian, that has a wonderful piece by Betty Luliver and Christine Campbell on transformative education, which puts authentic materials, authentic resources at its core. So I hope you will enjoy reading that. All right, so today I'm actually humbled by the number of people registered for this webinar. So thank you for coming, but I'm also a little nervous, and I hope we'll be able to have a discussion of this timeless topic, right? We've been talking about authentic materials for a long time. Certain things will be useful reminders. So certain things are certainly, a lot of things we're going to say is just a reflection of our personal opinions, and we realize that we are not, everybody's situation is different, right? So we will certainly rely on our students' proficiency. We make our choices based on the multiple factors, so there's no one right answer. Okay, so I would like to start with a reminder that ACTFL commands us to use authentic resources as one of the core practices for world language learning, along with using backward design and the comprehensible input. ACTFL prompts us to use authentic resources to devise reading and listening comprehension tasks. So they recognize the importance of authenticity. And for me, authenticity, not just authentic materials, not just authentic text, is a sort of an ultimate goal. While reaching Everest is possible, although not everybody does it, but I keep authenticity as kind of a ideal goal that I always have to strive for. Sometimes I, have all the checks. Sometimes I'm halfway there, but it's a goal for me. And certainly there are multiple authenticities, so to say, right? There's the authenticity of the text, which we'll talk about. And I just need to warn you that I'm going to give you my definition of authenticity a little later. So bear with me. Authenticity of tasks, authenticities of behavior. My favorite example of kind of situation that requires an authentic response was when I was working in kindergarten, and I was asking my 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds what presents they got for New Year, and everybody's like, "Oh, I got a car, I got a toy, and this," and then somebody said, "Oh, my dad died." I was so taken aback by this comment, and I honestly didn't know what to say. So it was impossible for me to say, "Okay, great," or impossible for me to start this conversation about the death. So, but I often see teachers responding to the language form, to the language as opposed to the meaning. So the authentic behavior dictates to respond to the meaning first, right? If somebody talks about, bad mood or something that happened in their life, we respond to that first, and then we need to make a decision whether or not to comment on the form, on the language. All right, and I just want to give a quick refresher on proficiency. Oops, what is this? Oh, is this me drawing? No, I don't know what's happening. Anyway, so proficiency as defined by ACTFL proficiency guidelines that you can access on their website. By the way, if you go to ACTFL resources page and click on the ACTFL proficiency guidelines and click on Russian, you will see the translation of the guidelines, as well as audio clips, some samples of proficiencies for different levels. Also, I want to point you to the new resource that Irina and her colleagues produced at Brandeis. So they created this web portal, website devoted to proficiency and explaining what proficiency is to students. And we recorded a couple of videos that kind of explain what proficiency is in lay terms, so students can understand what it is. So it's a good resource that I often send links to those videos to my students so they know what they are against. But proficiency, in this very simple definition, is an ability to use language for real-world communication. So if we are teaching in the proficiency-based classrooms, so we're teaching students to use language for real-world communications, not genitive case for genitive case sake, right? Although we all love explaining genitive. Can I please ask everyone to mute themselves? That'll be really, yes, and keep yourself muted unless you have a question.
And you accidentally muted yourself.
Yeah, okay. All right, so thank you. So as we all know, proficiency defined by ACTFL has 5 major levels: novice, intermediate, advanced, superior, and distinguished. And each level is described using through 4 parameters: functions, accuracy, text type, and context and content. And functions are kind of the primary driver for proficiency levels, and certainly an important concept as we create our curriculum. So we teach our students going away from producing lists as they do at the novice level, right? So what your favorite colors, what rooms are in your house, what are the subjects you're studying, towards asking questions and creating with the language. So producing non-memorized language, and do it in a sentence format. And then going from individual sentences and strings of sentences to narration and description in a kind of in a paragraph form, which is the main characteristic of advanced level, and then going towards hypotheses and arguments at the superior level. Another important concept of proficiency and then OPI is the concept of floor and the ceiling. So floor is where our students are at right now, and the ceiling is the next level that we're teaching them for. So if our students at the novice level, that's the floor level, and the ceiling is the intermediate. So it's important because our tasks and our questions and essentially the materials we choose for the classroom should be within that range, not lower, not higher. And we should always design our tasks and questions using that spiral. So spiral those topics. For example, if we're dealing with the topic of жилье, housing, and our students at the novice level, we start with questions like, какие комнаты, да, какая мебель у вас, да, у вас там, что есть, стол, стул, что еще. Right? Going from lists towards more open-ended questions, but still within the intermediate range. Да? Вам нравится ваш дом? Почему? Расскажите о своем доме. Какой он? В каком районе ваш дом? Опишите его. Где вы хотите жить? Почему? So notice that I'm not going towards detailed narration here or detailed description. I'm not trying to elicit stories from them. I'm going towards the functions that just described by intermediate level. In the same way, if we're going from intermediate to advanced within that topic, so the questions will reflect that spiral and that floor ceiling range. Расскажите о своем доме, какой он, that's intermediate. Как вы купили, как вы нашли свой дом, расскажите об этом. Here we have a little bit of narration. Что вы будете делать, чтобы купить, снять дом, narration in the future. Сравните ваше нынешнее жилье с домом детства, comparison, rich description. Как изменилось жилье за последние 30-40 лет. So that's the kind of a current event that advanced students should also be able to describe. All right. Any questions on proficiency levels, the difference between the levels? All right. Okay, and by the way, notice my choice of images here. So I had this and this. You probably recognize this house from what's the какая-то станция. Somebody type in the comment. I forgot. There's a Vydyncha, no, it's not Vydyncha. Tulska. That's where. Okay, that's where the market is, right? A famous market. So never miss an opportunity to use an authentic image, right? Never use an opportunity to introduce a little bit. Да, Данила Скириnek, спасибо, Иза. Wonderful, beautiful space. Never miss the opportunity to introduce a little bit of culture. So this is the image that my friend Ilya took. That's one of the host family houses in Irkutsk, a real place where students might be placed if they decide to go on the military program. So if we do a topic Yida, it's easy to just go online and type in Yida, food, and find this generic image of a white woman eating cereal, right? But it's certainly much more fun and much more kind of a reaction provoking to find this image of the machine selling горячие пельмешки, right? So even if we don't talk about this picture at all, even if you only do it, just put it on your presentation, your PowerPoint or handout, that's already tells a lot to students about the culture, gives us some vocabulary. So I encourage you, never use those stock images. Always try to find something that comes directly from Russia, and also organize your own images in a bank. So I just want to quickly share with you hold on a second. my collection of images, and I use Adobe Lightroom. For that, you have to pay for the subscription, but to me, it's worth it. So that's, I have a whole, it has all my pictures, but also I have a folder, Russia for Teaching, where I collect all the relevant images that I take when I go to Russia. So, for example, I have a folder on imperatives, imperative.
We only see the white screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. You only see white screen. That's weird. My apologies. Do you see it now? No? So I don't know what's happening. Anyway, so there are various software that allow you to collect your photos and annotate them and then use it for teaching. All right, back to my PowerPoint. So just like an OPI, questions and tasks in the classroom should be carefully crafted and selected to address the target proficiency functions. And the text should be selected considering students' floor and ceiling. Oftentimes we hear that mantra that change the task, not the text. I would argue with this statement. I would say, well, no. Well, first of all, choose the task, and text and the task is appropriate. Don't take, we all love, I don't know, Ironia Судьбы, you know, fill in the blank, any song, any movie, any short story that's out there. But it doesn't mean, even though it was written by Pushkin or made by Ryazanov, it doesn't mean it should have a place in your classroom. You should use this text, whatever text you are going to use, only if it addresses the proficiency level and the functions, only if it's appropriate for this situation. So to illustrate it, I just want to remind you of a song that many of you probably know. This wonderful song by Вахтанг Кикабидзе. Я хочу, чтобы песни звучали, чтобы вином наполнялся бокал, чтобы друг другу вы все пожелали то, что я вам сейчас пожелал. Wonderful, wonderful text. Very warm, and of course it has чтобы. Someone who was my colleague who was going to introduce чтобы in the past tense wanted to use that song, and I disagreed with that choice. I thought that well, yes, it has чтобы in 3 lines out of 4. Yes, it has past tense. Yes, it's a culturally significant song. Many people know it, and Vachtal Kikabidze is great and his wonderful voice, but it's it's too much, right? It's too much going on in this little text. I'll probably have to gloss every other word. It has this то, что я вам сейчас пожелал, that I probably won't be able to avoid. Students will be asking questions, so it's just too much. I would not, at this level, at the level when we introduce чтобы, which is probably what, 3rd semester, 4th semester Russian, that's not a good fit. So what to do? Well, let's find another song, maybe. So I go to textpesnik.ru or any other site that has lyrics. What do I have here? Чтобы елочка надела свой наряд, I have Kikabidze again, чтобы пики также были мы близки. Ты хочешь, чтобы я дома сидела, что про таджика я песни не пела. Well, хочу, чтобы ты стала моей женой. Well, that might work. Я хочу, чтобы ты всегда был рядом со мной. So, well, you know, not the best selection, but something. Maybe that Arbat, голубоглазая, светлоголосая, maybe it worked, maybe not. All right, so let's look someplace else. Let's go to Russian National Corpus, and That's the resource that I always use when I look for texts, including poetry, right? You all know that you can find poetic texts in Russian language, Russian corpus. So you just select поэтический под corpus and then type чтобы, and then you have those results. What do we have? Чехонцев, чтоб свет храминный из окошка, не барак. No, not. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of pages, and it is for me a lengthy process. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to find the text, to find the resource that I would like. So, but here I'm not seeing much. All right. And then let's maybe go to Yandex Kartinki, and I choose Yandex because it probably will give me most results in Russian, right? And Yandex probably knows that I teach languages, so it gives me a whole bunch of images related to teaching, PowerPoint images. There's not much. Well, there's that. Что нужно делать, чтобы быть здоровым, 18 правил, but it doesn't have the past tense that I need. All right, well, my next stop would be Yandex Novosti. And sometimes I just choose use the subtitle. I mean, the title of the Novosti, not the whole news. What do you have? В Канаде мужчина убил всю свою семью, чтобы скрыть... Not something I'd probably want to use. All right, let's choose. Let's look at Google Новости. Соболев не хочет. Here's one. Республиканцы не требуют, чтобы их однопартийцы голосовали против импичмента Трампа. Well, yeah, there are a bunch of cognates. There's a чтобы in the past tense, like we want. If I was teaching this class today, I might decide to use that little text again without reading the whole news, but showing my students the headline as an illustration of чтобы. So I'm showing you all these failed searches to kind of show the paths that I take and the routes that I take, and oftentimes one of these routes gives me wonderful results. Sometimes they don't. Then I resort to my own kind of a photo bank, and I find this Mandelstam plaque in Moscow. Я хочу, чтобы мыслящее тело превратилось в улицу, страну. Again, for that level might not be the best choice, but it does help me. It does introduce an important poet. It has something. It has substance. It has meaning. So that brings me to the question of why using this authentic text. Is it really necessary? Is it required? Does it really? Do students really care? If I show them these images, if we sing songs. In my experience, the answer is yes, they do care, and it does create kind of this excitement and does teach them and oftentimes hooks them on certain, writers and films, etc. Although the research on authenticity and motivation is not doesn't confirm firmly that there is a strong correlation between authenticity and motivation. But I often use authentic texts. And as you could see, a text could be just a quote, right? It could be a quick ad. And certainly the amount of text will reflect, and the complexity of the text will reflect students' proficiency. So I often use it either as a kind of a invitation for the conversation and the starter for the class, or later I could use it as a kind of a reading text or listening text for practice. And thanks to internet, now we have a whole variety of authentic text, and going from obvious poems and films and TV programs, going to something that may be less obvious, but something that we didn't have access before. For example, the your friends' letters of Facebook posts, for example, right? I've been using this post by a friend that she posted on her Facebook and congratulating her friends on 8th of March. And I thought, well, it's a great little real text, real message here. And my students, we can compose even a message and type it as a comment to this post on Facebook. I've been often using my own family tree that I created on ancestry.com as a text, as a way to talk about family and to talk about my family, introduce them. And of course, we like poetry, but poetry, you shouldn't be reminded of that, but poetry is not just Pushkin and all this канонические писатели. It's also Kujava that has fantastic, accessible, easy lyrics. It could be contemporary poets like Vera Pavlova in this wonderful poem that you can see here. All right, how am I doing with time, Mira?
I was thinking maybe, I don't know, 5 more minutes.
Okay. All right. So, and when we make a decision whether or not to use the particular text, there are a couple of new resources out there. One is a great tool by Pushkin Institute that measures the lexical complexity of a text and tells you which level it is. So you can find it on pushkinlab.ru. So I typed in that text that you saw from Facebook, that Facebook post, and it rated as Dean. So our novice mid, right? Novice high. So very, very interesting resource. And another resource created by our colleagues at Harvard University, Tim Clancy and his team, Visualizing Russian. So that also, I think they give you the analysis by year. So they the green one is you see is the vocabulary of the first year vocabulary, and the blue is the second year vocabulary, if I'm not mistaken. So another useful, again, not fine, that it wouldn't make a final, wouldn't be a final factor for me, but certainly a factor, all these tools. And of course, when we use authentic text, there are a number of challenges. And one of the, I would say recent, but for me, it is recent. Challenge difficulty is the bias and stereotypes and offensive language and imagery in Russian. What we used to find is either, oh, it's cultural, or it's, all Russians do it, or it's kind of, that's how, it's done in Russian. But our students do, take offense, right? And I deal with the consequences if I, for example, show the film Svadьба or Nelюбовь, and I don't warn them about the potential scenes of sexual violence. Even Москва слезам не верит, right? A lot of students, interpret a certain scene in this movie as what's the word I'm looking for?
Sexual assault.
Yeah, and we can argue with them, but it doesn't matter for me. I know, since I know some students will have that reaction, I will tell them right away about that. Or films like Courier. Right, we like to use this film in our second year classroom. It's great, illustration of that era, and it's a wonderful character, but students typically react negatively to Ivan, right? So I preface the assignment with the kind of a short paragraph describing the historical context of the film, reminding them when the film was made, and also kind of making a plea to students not to judge the main character, kind of foreseeing that they will have a strong reaction. But I do want them. I want this interaction with the film to be, I want them to find deeper meanings than just saying, "Oh, Ivan is, he's a." Idiot, like I don't like him. I don't like the film because I don't like the character, right? We all heard that reactions. So I think we could do take simple steps to overcome that resistance. And of course, things like images like this, I mean, they are innocent, might seem innocent on the surface, but there's a lot. Our contemporary students will see a lot, and some of them, again, will be offended. So what I invite us all to kind of think critically about every text, every image that we choose, and make a decision, make a conscious decision, and also respect our students' right to be offended and to find a bias. And often, they're right, but we need to warn them, and we need to be ready to deal with consequences if we decide to use that film, right? I'm not gonna show Svadba anymore, but can't avoid Moskva slezam ne verит, so I will do everything I can to kind of soften that impression. And of course, the bigger issues that we see is that when the complexity of the text doesn't match the task. We all know this wonderful poem by Tsvetaeva, and it starts with this, phrase that we all teach in first year, "Мне нравится." But is it a reason to use this poem to introduce "Мне нравится," even to illustrate it? I don't think so. It's way above our students' proficiency at the point when we introduce "Мне нравится." Plus, it doesn't have "Мне нравится кто" или "Мне нравится что," right? Structure. "Мне нравится что вы больны не мной." So immediately it goes way beyond a sentence type, a sentence structure that we would like them to use. So again, just because it has this "Мне нравится," just because it's so common and everybody knows this poem, not a reason for us to use the text. All right, finally, I'm doing the opposite here. What is authentic? What is the authentic text? And of course, the debate's been going on for a long time, and the classic definition, and I think the one that Actful gives, or like kind of edited the definition that Actful cites, the authentic text is the one written by members of a language and culture group for members of the same language and culture group. Yes, but again, there are so many things that we can debate here. I like more the definition here, although this definition is not ideal either, but it has, for me, the key phrase. A stretch of real language produced by a real speaker writer for a real audience and designed to convey a real message of some sort. Real message for me is the key element of authentic text. Yeah, we can, argue what the real language is the language produced by educated native speaker living in Moscow is more real than the language produced by me living in Amherst, Massachusetts. What is the real audience? What was Pushkin's real audience when he wrote Ya vas lubil? What is, real speaker? Again, there's all this nuances that we can, debate, discuss, but if the message is real, and by real, I mean, is the speaker really kind of a conveying authentic, real, true meaning? Are they talking about, as we used in our forthcoming textbook at AG. So we ask native speakers to tell us what they eat during the day. So that's their responses. We did edit them. This text was produced kind of for this textbook, but the message is real. They are describing the real issues and the real day. Or this young man tells us about what he thinks people should wear for Bolshoi theater. So that's the examples and the approach that we're using in ACTR to kind of present authentic texts. I'll stop here, right, Irina? Right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I will need to share my screen. All right. So taking over from Evgeny, I'll talk about the concept of scaffolding and a specific type of scaffolding known as the gradual release of responsibility framework. And I will try to connect the multiple points that Evgeny made throughout my part of the presentation as well. So I think most of us, if not all of us, know what scaffolding means for in our context, in language teaching, language learning context. It is a temporary but essential support mechanism through which novices acquire new skills, knowledge, and understanding with the help of the experts. And in our context, the novices are the learners and the experts are as the instructors. And we know that this concept has its roots in the work by Vygotsky and in the concept of the zone of proximal development. The gradual release of responsibility framework also comes out of that theoretical background, but it also includes other works, and you see the list here. And the framework stipulates that for learning to be most effective, there needs to be a purposeful and pre-planned shift of the cognitive load from teacher to joint responsibility of teacher and learner to finally and ultimately independent practice and application by the learner. And you see the reference by Pearson and Gallagher to this definition, who also give us this visual representation of the framework. So if the teaching and learning are represented by the two triangles, then you can see how we start with focused instruction, with the majority of the responsibility for the task residing with the instructor. And then we move through stages, and these stages are premeditated, pre-planned, they're purposeful to move that cognitive load from the teacher to the student through guided instruction, through opportunities for collaborative learning until we arrive at independent learning. So the 4 stages have names. I do, we do guided, you do collaborative, you do alone. And the names are given to capture the essence of each stage. And we will go now through the stages one by one. I will give the basic characteristics of the stage, the goal, the instructor's role, and I will also give an example of how this kind of scaffolding can help us work with authentic texts. And before I start, I want to say just a couple of words about how the example was chosen. So when Evgeny and I were preparing for this webinar, we thought about like how this is always the problem of how to fit an elephant into a jewelry box. And that is the question of authenticity and scaffolding. And we discussed how at different levels of instruction, authentic texts can serve different purposes. Some of them are the same, but many of them are different. So we all, if we think about it, we all use authentic texts at the higher level of instruction, 3rd, 4th year, whether we have developed curriculum, full year curriculum, or individual courses, we usually use authentic texts. It's films that we watch, it's literature that we read, 20th or 19th century, poetry, news in Russian, some thematic courses like the Russian childhood, where students read, I know in some universities, children's literature. So we work with authentic texts, but we don't always employ authentic texts at the lower level of instructions. And what Evgeny was trying to show us is that there is certainly a place, even at the 1st and 2nd year instruction, for authentic materials. And they could be works of literature, but they also could be more рядовые тексты written by just regular people on Facebooks or memes or some other materials. And so for the example, we chose to use this short poem that we could build this kind of scaffolding, these 4 stages for the lowest level of instruction for, let's say, 1st semester, 1st year Russian. So stage 1, I do. Focused instruction begins here. So the goal is to introduce the material, to provide input, to make input comprehensible, and a little bit to focus attention on the structure in focus or under acquisition, if we're talking about the lower, especially about the lower level of instruction. The instructor serves as a language model who makes input comprehensible. Students are involved. This doesn't mean that students are not working. Among other things, they're comprehending, and that's a hell of a lot of work that our students have to do. But their responsibility for the work that needs to be done is minimal. Some important nuances to keep in mind as we're planning our lessons, that first we begin with a goal and the students need to understand the goal. The authors, the literature on GRR, the gradual release of responsibility, warns us to think about the goals not just as goals by themselves, but goals and purpose. Because goals could be written in a variety of ways, including in ways that are not comprehensible to our students. And for example, we will introduce in practice the complexities of the endings of the genitive case in the plural, if they don't know even what the genitive case is at that stage. So we need to keep the purpose in mind, why we're going to engage with the material and why we're going to be doing the work that we're inviting students to do. There should be connection always to the previous materials, so students are not left wondering where this came from. The material needs to be cognitively engaging and obviously age appropriate. And at this stage, focuses on meaning more than on anything else. These are really, we do not want you to think that these are absolute categories. We're focusing only on meaning, as if grammatical structures do not create meaning, right? So this is a question of degree. Some of the common mistakes that we can make at this stage. We did not establish the relevance of the input. And this is going back to the example of «Я хочу, чтобы песни звучали», and back to the example of «Мне нравится, что вы больны не мной». So, okay, мне нравится, but do I need to have a whole verse of the poem to get students to work with the construction «Мне кто-то нравится» или «что-то нравится»? What is the relevance of this? Why do I have to spend so much time understanding the poem if the only 2 words from the poem that I will need is «мне нравится», and they don't even, and they obscure actually the complexity of the structure and the acquisition. Another mistake is there may be too much input material all at once that students cannot process. It's not divided into manageable pieces. And a too common mistake is that we did not spend enough time at this stage and moved to the second one, we do, too quickly. So here's the example. Let's say I come in my textbook to the chapter on the genitive case. We're right now dealing only with the singular. And yes, I could use the material of the textbook. There are multiple ways in how I can work with the language material, including explicit grammar explanations. But I feel inspired and I want to use an authentic text. And I should also say that why use authentic text? It's not only because they may give us a model of a particular structure that we will be using, but there are also opportunities for what I call incidental learning. Language learning is never that focused, that only this construction is being memorized, practiced, acquired, and that's it. That there's a lot of things that are happening at the same time, and that's what authentic materials allow us to do. So let's say following the process that Evgeny showed us, looking at different places, there is this wonderful book, Стихи, стишки, стишочки, compiled by Olga Stelter, and we find this poem there. We could use it, let's brainstorm, we could use it to introduce the genitive case. In addition, for the incidental learning, let's look at this. It's a fairly simple text, even for first semester, first year Russian. They will already know, at least I'm judging by my textbook, they will already know the word pagoda. They will already have adjectives. They already have past tense. There are some things that will not be understandable, yes, and that's why we are there at stage one to help students comprehend by using gestures, pantomime, pictures, glosses when necessary, maybe even, and this is controversial, substitutions. So Evgeny and I talked about this, шел. It's a verb of motion, and maybe I don't want to open this Pandora's box. Can I replace шел with гулял? And then I can say the poem is based on Renata Mucha's poem «Песня о плохой погоде», and it will even fit rhythmically into these lines. In addition, I have some cultural stuff. Бутерброд is not the same as sandwich. In addition, for incidental learning, стояла плохая погода. Стояла is a metaphorical use of this verb. Is it a frequently used construction in Russian? Yes. Why not have them practice this and actually internalize this construction? На улице было сыро. На улице is the translation of the word outside, a very useful word for them to get. Okay, so let's say we decide to proceed with this. So the first stage, we will concentrate on activating our language apparatus, comprehending and interpreting. So we'll do a lot of reading. It's not enough for us to read it alone by ourselves. We can ask students to imitate us. We read, they repeat. We can take turns. So they read lines 1 and 3. We as instructors read lines 2 and 4. And then we change that order. We ask them to work in pairs. We ask them to dramatize this poem. Because we're already seeing плохая погода. We're already understanding that this is not something that is exactly cheerful. So let's do the best, saddest reading that we can, or the most dramatic reading as if you're on stage, or the quietest reading, or the fastest reading. So there are multiple opportunities for students to read. While we're reading, at the same time, we're working on comprehension. It's not like we're just reading for the sake of reading mechanically, and they never understand what they are reading, except for a few words here and there. So all of these things, helping them understand all of this approaches work. Once we've gone through this, we can also talk about interpretation, or we can talk about interpretation at the same time. We can do this in Russian, we can do this in English. This depends on the level of our students, and sometimes even within the same university, you get a group of students that are weaker and a group of students that are stronger as first years. And this is another interesting thing about this piece, that it will allow us to play with the language, because there is this absurdism built into the meaning. So what kind of бутерброд is it without cheese, butter, and bread? As you can see, the last line in each of the stanzas talks about what this бутерброд is without. Everything that is important for comprehension at this point is explained and supported by the visuals, the gestures, the glosses. We've done with interpretation. We can also talk about, so what will happen. What do we need to do to change the mood? Is it enough to just change стояла хорошая погода? So this is how we get to talk about бутерброд без сыра, без масла и без хлеба. Okay, moving on to stage 2A, which is we do guided. So the goal of the stage is to give learners an opportunity to use the new material on their own and to do focused work with the structures and the acquisition. So in our case, we're planning to do the genitive case. Students here at this stage start combining different pieces of material from the input, and they have lots of opportunities to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes, because this is the situation of low risk, because the instructor is there to support. And I didn't say it before, I want to say it now. It's not like there is a clear border between these stages. So all of this is kind of already can start happening at stage 1. So students, when they are taking turns reading, they're already kind of experimenting with the material. When they're changing the intonation, that's also language work that is important. But specifically for working with the construction, the structure that we are acquiring, the lexicogrammatical structure, that's the stage when they start playing with this. Oh, sorry, I think I skipped one. So the instructor's role here is that of a facilitator. The instructor initiates, sustains interaction with students and engages all students in these opportunities to experiment with a new material. The instructor monitors mistakes, provides lots of feedback, both to the group as a whole and individually. And attention is given to the structure in focus here. The important nuances that we need to keep in mind as we're designing activities for this stage. We need to anticipate difficulties, possible mistakes, and analytical errors in students' processing. And we need to have a plan for how to compensate for those difficult spots. What kind of hints, clues, questions we need to have ready. This work kind of is done, again, because there's no a clear boundary, is kind of already done before stage 1, because I had to think about what words need to be glossed, what kind of images to find, what gestures will help, what cognates I could use to support their understanding. But let's say, again, specifically focusing on the structure. So it's genitive and it's food. Okay, I can work with that. One of the difficulties may be that students may want to start using something in the plural. So I need to structure my tasks in such a way that it would minimize or prevent them entirely from using the genitive plural. One of the words I want to use is огурец. It has a fleeting vowel. I need to have a plan for that. So how do I do that? Do I break into English for explaining that? Do I just mark it as, without conceptual understanding at this point, this is just what happens to this? Do I give them other examples so they would know that this is what happens to the fleeting vowel? So these are decisions that we can make individually. But it's important to think about all of these points as we're designing the activities for the stage. Some common mistakes that we're prone to make. This stage needs to be a fairly big stage. And if we only plan one task, it's not enough. If we did not foresee the difficult spots, like we did not even think about how pizza без грибов, конечно, без помидора, без лука и без грибов. We gave them the word, and now we're stuck with somehow dealing with this genitive plural, and we didn't want to have it. Or we didn't think through the steps of the assignment. So we actually did foresee the difficult places, and we did create what we think is a good assignment, but students did not have everything they needed to complete the task. We forgot to give them some particular construction that they would need to use. So going back to the poem, here is my genitive. And so I'll start highlighting the structure in focus with just my intonation as I'm reading. So again, this could be starting even at stage 1. Шел человек по городу и ел бутерброд без сыра. Бутерброд без масла и бутерброд без хлеба. Сыр без сыра, масло без масла, хлеб без хлеба. Let's continue. Let's find more ways to describe this miserable situation. It continues. Яйцо без яйца, помидор без помидора. So I'm not at some, after the, maybe even без сыра, без масла, без хлеба, без яйца. At this moment, I will stop and I will ask students to supply what the бутерброд is without. So помидор, I will wait for them to give me без помидора. And so this is how I'm checking that they built the hypothesis and they're now testing it. And огурец may come up here because there is a British sandwich with cucumber and butter. Some people put mayonnaise. So we can play with this, but at this stage, I'm asking students to supply the correct form for me. So we're still with the poem. We're still talking about how miserable this situation is and this poor guy who doesn't have anything for his buterbrod. What if it's sweet buterbrod? Some Russians have it sweet. So it's the one without butter and sugar, butter and honey, butter and варенье. What if it's not buterbrod but sandwich? Because there are more ingredients that could go in the sandwich. One thing that I didn't say at the previous slide is, so in particular with this poem, we thought about how we don't want genitive plural. We noticed that there is only the first declension paradigm, so masculine and neuter. We know there is no feminine. We need to anticipate how to do this. So how do we introduce the feminine? Let's say that I worked through масло, сыр, помидор, майонез, яйцо, салат, мясо. And now I'm introducing the feminine, but in the same pattern. So first I go. We're continuing with the miserable situation. Бутерброд без курицы, курица курицы. Сыр без сыра. Курица без курицы. Сэндвич без майонеза и горчицы. Горчица без горчицы. The next item, I would expect the students to supply, and I would test if they form their hypothesis and if I can continue further. Okay, without clear border, we're moving to stage 2B. You do together, collaborative. So here the goal is for the students to apply the newly acquired skills to new situations and possibly with new content. Here tasks should engage students with the language for a significant period of time. If I said that the previous stage needed to be fairly large, this one needs to be even larger. They need to work with more than one partner, at least one partner, but more than one ideally. And the tasks that we give them should require collaboration and co-creation of meaning. So they are learning collaboratively. The instructor's role is that of a coach. We take a step back and we let students focus on performing the function versus focusing on the structure. That is not to say that we completely move away from, in our case, the genitive case, but they are performing some kind of tasks with this genitive case. We provide help only when it's necessary. Individual feedback is much more important at this stage because they're working in pairs or in small groups. Some common mistakes. The tasks that we created for this stage are the same as in the previous stage, and as a result, they're too easy. We start introducing a lot of new material at this stage. We should not be doing that. We may introduce a word or one formula that may be useful for the new tasks that we prepared, but we should not be introducing at this stage genitive plural, for example. And we did not take the step back. We're still there in their faces. We're providing them with clues, hints, support, questions, correct forms. they need to try to do it without us. So we really need to keep that in mind. Here, let's brainstorm. So these are just some of the ideas that we put together, and you can certainly come up with other ones or different ones. So let's stick with the topic of miserable person in the miserable town with the miserable weather without any ingredients for a good meal. We can ask students to make a list of items, of ingredients that should be excluded from their order of, let's say, pizza or пирожки, or McDonald's order. We can ask them to play, kind of to talk about the absurd here, expressing their preferences, like борщ без воды – это абсурд. Борщ без свеклы – это абсурд. Борщ без помидоров – это абсурд. Here, perhaps, so nothing new is introduced here. Evgeny was suggesting that maybe we could introduce the construction борщ не бывает без. So yeah, we introduced one word, but this it's okay. It's not okay to be flooding them with more information at this stage when the hypothesis that they created in their minds about how this construction works, the preposition без with the correct endings, when it's not solidified yet. So that's the kind of new information we should be avoiding. We should and can introduce new lexical items if they're needed to perform the function. Again, connecting to the absurdism of the poem. So your idea of the best and the worst pizza. Самая хорошая пицца – это пицца без. Or we can describe an absurdist dessert, soup, breakfast, salad, dinner, etc. We can ask them to survey the class about what their classmates can and cannot live without. We can still stick to the food, or we can introduce other categories, and this is how we're introducing new context with the same structure. So it could be foods, technologies, activities. Students would have lists of words, and they would walk around the class asking these questions and then recording the answers of their classmates in order to create like a picture of the class. Like this is as a group, this is what we cannot live without. I cannot spend too much time on this because we're really running out of time. And I wasn't planning anyway, but I just want to highlight that if some of you who come from the Russian pedagogical training may know Yefim, may remember Yefim Израилевич Pasov and his система упражнений для изучения языка, which lends itself very nicely to the work that we can do, we should do with creating scaffolding, appropriate scaffolding for our students. So he divided language learning activities into proper language exercises, pseudo speaking tasks, and proper speaking tasks. So языковые, условно-речевые, and речевые упражнения. So the language exercises really are drills. And I want to go on record to say that, yes, I am not against drills. I'm against mindless drills that involved tractor, drivers, and fields of potatoes. Drills can still be contextualized, but they do allow us to focus on the form, especially if the form is highly complex. However, the biggest attention that we should be giving as we're planning our scaffolding is to pseudo-speaking tasks and proper speaking tasks. And then if we look at the pseudo-speaking tasks, which are probably the most interesting for us within this framework of the gradual release of responsibility, they are these types that Pasov outlined. Упражнения на имитацию, when learners just imitate, and that's kind of stage one. Replacements, transformations, and reproductions. And these are stages 2A and 2B as we're moving to stage 3, independent production, which are речевые упражнения, which are discussions, explanations, descriptions. And again, I'm using these words mindfully because I'm not expecting a description of the advanced level. in my first semester, first year Russian. The description is maybe 2 sentences long or 2 phrases long. Okay. And then finally, we get to stage 3. I do it alone. And the goal here is for students to apply new skills and new knowledge independently from the teacher. Not necessarily independently from each other. They can still work in pairs. They can still co-create, but they're independent from the teacher. The instructor's role here, cheerleader on the sides. We're taking 2 steps back here. It's minimal or no correction of mistakes, and the feedback is really on the meaning. Wow, this is the best absurdist lunch in the class. Or wow, I didn't realize that the majority of students in our class cannot live without Netflix. And the feedback is on the meaning. You know, I've been living without Netflix just fine. I can live without Netflix. But yes, you're right, I cannot live without Wi-Fi anymore. You know, these kind of comments, because we're focusing on the meaning that they're creating, the meaning of the function that they're creating. And notice that it's minimal or no correction. So I don't want to say that if somebody completely misses the structure that we've been acquiring, genitive case in our case, doesn't mean that we shouldn't provide some kind of feedback there and remind, like, refocus them back on the construction, among other things, citing the poem that we started with and highlighting those words без хлеба, без сыра, again, to help them refocus on the endings. Some common mistakes here. The task is not meaningful at this stage, or authentic, and Evgeny talked about it, or relevant to the text that we started with. Then why was the text even used? The task does not correspond to the declared goal and purpose or to the level of our students. They cannot, it's too easy or too hard for them. Students were not prepared well for the stage, and they end up mimicking instructor and they not produce their own language. Or they're not prepared to work independently. We moved too fast. We actually didn't give them enough opportunities to practice this with us when we guide them, and with us taking a step back when they're working in small groups. Instructor, again, is still there, not moving away from the students, providing too many clues, and instructor expects 100% accuracy. That is not going to happen. And again, you know, especially in the first year, but it's another philosophical debate anyway. But yes, we're not expecting 100% accuracy here. So what could we do as an assignment for the 3rd stage? Let's say we can ask students to describe what they can and cannot live without. Feel free to be the absurdist. So it's the most loose connection to the original text. We can ask them to summarize class survey results in kind of presentation. We can come back to it later when we do genitive plural. Or, and this is the best one in terms of connecting back to the text and circling it back, and allowing for incidental learning to happen more, and awakening their creative forces. Write your own poem. It's a different, it's a different day, it's a different person, it's a different weather. We can, if we're afraid of the complexities of this, so, sorry, I keep touching my mouse, that makes me jump. We don't want to deal with shoal. Okay, we'll replace it with gulyal, or we just give them, we just highlight. So shoal, yes, okay, it's a very special verb. It means this very specific type of motion. And by the way, it has a very specific forms of the past tense. It's not shola and sholi. So we can just give them what they're missing, or we can tell them, you can change only the 1st and the 4th line and leave everything else the same. Or we can tell them, okay, it doesn't have to rhyme. It could be a prose. So these are the kind of things that we can ask students to do. General comments at the very end. Not every lesson will have all 3 stages. Sometimes it will take several lessons to get from stage 1 to stage 3. It's helpful for us to keep in mind these releases, these moments when we release responsibility, when the responsibility shifts more and more towards the student. But again, it could be a whole week before we get to stage 3. It could be an entire unit. Stages do not have an equal amount of time. but it is important to remember that we should not skip through them too quickly. Stage 1 may or may not be a text. So this was just an example of how we could use authentic text even at the lowest level of instruction and still use it for the introduction of linguistic construction and acquisition. But these stages are helpful even if we're not using a text as the starting point. And there are no clear borders. I've said that several times, and this is really what it should look like. So providing input to guiding, to sharing, to applying, with one blending into another. And this is all for my part. I can stop sharing, and I know there have been comments and questions coming in, and Olga help us get through them.
Okay, Irina, I just stopped highlighting you or spotlighting you. So I think so far I saw one question. At the interpretation stage, do you permit use of English or do you keep students to the Russian they can produce?
And I think we can take turns, Evgeny, answering, right? I think I mentioned that it depends on the level of the students that we are dealing with in this particular semester. There are some groups that are stronger, that could deal with interpretation in Russian, or we really need to prepare ourselves for this. So what kind of cognates will help me interpret this particular text? Let's say we're still talking about песенка о плохой погоде. Абсурд, парадокс, бутерброд — это сэндвич, это не сэндвич, вот сэндвич, вот бутерброд. Can I use my facial expressions? Can I provide glosses without switching to English? Can I say настроение and put on the board that it means mood and ask them, какое настроение? Грустное, веселое. Этот человек энергичный, этот человек не энергичный. So I have to, if I do it in Russian, I have to do a lot of preparatory work on my part. One consideration could be time. So if I have only 50 minutes, I may not want to spend all this time on interpretation. So maybe we'll switch in English for this. Evgeny?
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, ideally all of it is done in Russian and it could be done in Russian. But if anything else, we should at least somehow touch on the meaning of the text, even if it means resorting to English. But I think we just have to, you know, if we're dealing with a poem or image or something like that, something authentic, it has to be some discussion, even if it's like very short, of the meaning of that text.
There was a small technical question for Evgeny. Is Adobe better than Google Photo?
I don't know. I stopped using Google Photos a while ago. I like Adobe Lightroom a lot.
Well, I think we should also say, and I'm surprised you didn't mention that on teachrussian.org, there is a repository of authentic images that could be used.
Right. And also I forgot to share a new podcast that we recently, was it a year ago, 2 years ago already, started that has a collection of listening texts that again don't fall under strict definition authentic. It's not all of them are done by native speakers for native speakers, but they are mostly have real message at the core. People talking about the way they study, how Russians dress, favorite places, and all of that. So, and that podcast is geared towards novice/intermediate speakers. So, as early as second semester, you could start using those files.
Okay, there is another question. In addition to public resources like Teach Russian, do you maintain your own private database of authentic written oral text, similar to the way Lightroom can be used for images? If so, what system do you use?
I don't.
Me either. I don't have a good system of organizing written text, Hila. But Olga, you might share your system and the collection you're starting.
I mean, for my personal teaching purposes, it's mostly just links and the Google Doc where I put all the stuff. So, and there are of course several tools, several websites where you can save links and the images that are located on the websites. I just recently started using a couple of them. But yeah, about the resource that we are going to, on which we are working, I will talk about this a little bit more on Friday. But I do have a question for both of you, Ira and Zhenya. So I just recently participated in the Pushkin Institute winter school. And in one of the presentations, I remember the teachers from, the instructors from the Pushkin school, they mentioned something that authentic texts, especially I'm assuming at the novice level, the very beginning level, it's like level Adin, should have only 2 to 3% of unfamiliar words. And that kind of got me puzzled because I think when they start counting, you know, even all these tools that Evgeny, you showed today, like how you can calculate, right, put a text and calculate to which level this text belongs. So very often cognates do not belong there, right? Like these calculators, they don't take cognates into consideration. So, and that's what kind of got me confused. Is like, it's so difficult to find authentic materials at the very novice level if we are going to use this formula, only 2 to 3% of unknown vocabulary. What is your opinion on that?
I don't believe in exact numbers when it applies to human beings and when it applies to language classroom, which in my definition is supposed to be messy, is supposed to be uneven, is supposed to be kind of a rough. So if I start thinking, oh, it's 2% or 3%, 4 words, 5 words, I will never do anything. You know, I'll just, it's this unnecessary obstacle that I don't want to even think about. Okay. I know the strategies that I can use to make the text accessible. I know how to modify input, like Irina mentioned, the glosses and the pictures, whatnot, shortenings, deletions. I have no problem deleting or using, as one of you mentioned, yeah, just one stanza will do. But I don't believe that language and math go, not in my classroom. So that would be a nightmare for me if I had to teach by these rules.
And I want to add to this. So I think the Harvard resource does, too bad that Veronika Egorova, if you're still here, please chime in. But I didn't find her among participants. Too bad that she may be left already. I think their calculator does highlight, does indicate like cognate, or maybe cognates are considered to be level 1 because they're readily accessible. But that somehow they account for cognates. But I want to say also that with this whole idea of like messy authentic texts, if we are calculating these numbers, then what happens, and this is, I think, the biggest problem for many of us in teaching Russian at different levels, is that there is often virtually no authentic materials of significance in the first and second year, and then a huge amount of them in the third and fourth year, when they're supposed to read Chekhov now, after they've done 4 semesters of Russian, without touching the messy language the way it exists. So everything was curated for them, everything was sterilized, and they never had to deal with it. So for me, this is kind of like this big conceptual shift in my thinking recently was, so how can I help them at the lower levels of proficiency to deal with messy authentic texts, obviously trying to get them at the right level. And kind of the breakthrough for me was the washback effect of doing integrative performance assessments, the IPAs, that actually, and if you're not familiar with this, I encourage everybody to go Google ACTful IPA, and you'll find a publication there. You'll find resources for IPA. So one of the things how it works is this interpretive reading and listening. The tasks that IPAs require students to do for interpretive reading and listening, what I'm trying to formulate my thought, help us understand the kind of strategies that we need to teach our students in order to deal with authentic texts, because only authentic texts are used in these IPAs for interpretive reading and listening. And so we need to teach students how to work with these messy texts of native speakers. Yeah, they may be curated a little bit for the beginning level, but we need to teach them how to recognize cognates, how to use contextual neighbors to make educated guesses, how to make use of, how to put to use their knowledge of roots and prefixes, how to pay attention to grammar, which will help them interpret the meaning. All of these things come together to help them deal with these authentic texts. So that's just another way of how authentic texts could be used in the classroom to teach language. So the example that I was showing through scaffolding is one way, but then there is another type of learning and teaching that we could be doing in the classroom, which is actually teaching strategies, probably in English, explanation will be in English, of how to engage with authentic text and get something out of it. Also understanding that at the novice level or intermediate level, they're not supposed to be getting everything. They're supposed to get the main idea and a few supporting details. So if 98% of the words are familiar to them, then they should be getting the entire text and not just the main idea.
Mm-hmm. Anyone wants to share their own view on using authentic or experience authentic resources in the classroom? Anyone wants to argue with us, or? Because it's a very debatable topic, right? Paulina, I see you. Wanted to say something.
Yes, I have a question, but again, I understand that was, this activity was demonstrated for the sake of showing us all the steps of scaffolding. But I keep thinking, so this activity alone would take, I don't know, just with this a poem, 20 minutes, even more. If you have a textbook, if you have a chapter in the textbook, how do you manage it? I also incorporate shorter texts, right? But I do realize that if I would analyze a poem, then I have to substitute. So how do you find balance, in using textbook exercises, which are also probably just geared more toward authentic material?
Well, there are different textbooks. So, for example, this semester I've been using Galasa for the first time in a long time. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Rich, for putting it for free, the 5th edition, making it available online. So I think Galasa allows for more flexible approach and gives me opportunity to create, to build, my classroom the way I want it and include those texts. So I know Ira teaches with Life from Russia, which is more structured, and there's less ways to spend additional 20 minutes, so half an hour or an hour or whole class working on just one poem. But that's the choice we have to make, right? So if we want our students to expose our students to authentic materials, to poems and songs, we have to make sacrifices, and we don't have to do it every week. right? If we do it periodically, that's fine. It's better than don't do it at all. But that's the choice you make.
But I think that the strategy, the scaffolding strategy, all the steps that Irina conveyed could also be applied, right, to non-authentic texts or
Absolutely. Or even
how we approach, and especially at the beginning, right, the focused instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. It as I said at the end, you don't even have to start with the text. But if you do start with it, then this is one way to do it. And I was actually keeping in mind that this could be all done within a 50-minute lesson. Just have to watch ourselves. All of this needs to be super energetic work, с энтузиазмом, вперед. So we read, the whole reading part and the whole interpretation part should probably not take more than 10 minutes. We can really stick to that only. Of course, I haven't even mentioned about the pre-class work that needs to happen, that we need to make sure that they have the vocabulary that we will be working with later, that all of this курица, горчица, майонез, помидор are already familiar to them. Sandwich, бутерброд is already familiar to them. Or it's also possible that, let's say, we combine and I believe in, I support, let me put it this way, because it's less of a belief. I support the camp, the SLA camp that highlights the effectiveness of explicit and conceptual understanding of grammar, especially when it comes to complex structures. So I'm not saying that there is never a place for actual conceptual explanation. And I could take the genitive case the way it is presented in my textbook, and I actually do with other cases, not with the genitive. I do flipped classroom where I record the videos that students watch and then do comprehension activities where I explain explicitly and conceptually what is happening. But then this kind of work could be done without the introduction of this сыр без сыра, обратите внимание, это So I could just work through the stages to help them activate, internalize, and get them to producing these constructions. And having incidental learning. Sorry, Irina, continue.
That's fine. I would like to especially thank you for this presentation today, because we talked today a lot about students, and that's what they crave. They crave authenticity, right? Because when they come to us, one of the most frequent desire of theirs is to sound like an authentic Russian person, right? And that allows them to practice that authentic language, authentic grammar, authentic imperfection of the Russian language, because, they feel that when they present, grammatically accurate sentence, and we often tell them, well, grammatically it's accurate, but nobody say it like that, really. So that's when they feel slightly inadequate. So you framing this very beautifully, that this is the multi-purpose and multi-usage of the authentic text, is really, that's what we need to sprinkle, I guess, generously in our classrooms. And I would definitely agree that balance between the traditional education with the grammar and, traditional methods of teaching definitely is valid point. But again, we live in the 21st century, and I'm tremendously grateful. Semester begins next week. I am inspired. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. I'm still trying to, you still don't see my photos, right?
No.
No. What's going on?
There's tiny small questions in the chat, but I don't know if you want just to respond to this quickly or not. It's from Tim about Latin letters or English words are not infrequent in Russian language advertisements or in Russian language in the public space nowadays, right? So what is your comment to students about what this says about Russian society culture? There are so many Angloisms, right, nowadays.
I want to answer was like Richard Robbins, and he was like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, bring them on, because they're fun. They grab attention, and they certainly, I mean, I teach my first year with showing them Russian, coffee shop, atelier, you know, all these Starbucks and all these names of American brands written in Cyrillic, or English words written in Cyrillic. So I think there is, again, time and place for this. And what do they tell about Russian society culture? Well, I don't know. I don't know what they tell about Russian society culture.
Yeah, they do tell us a lot. There is unprecedented amount of borrowings that are entering the Russian language from English. It's similar to how it was so many centuries ago for French and for Dutch.
Right.
So it's normal. This is what's happening, and yeah, this is what Russian speakers use.
Listen to Medusa podcast on Russian language, and listening to experts talk about, calmly talking about things like that makes me feel, okay, well, I shouldn't be worried about borrowings and Anglicism and the amount of Latinsky alphabet. So no, I'm totally fine with that.
Just an anecdotal episode. Recently, someone posted on social media about a picture from the airport in Minsk, and there was a door, and the sign on the door, "Mopnaya." Mopnaya, and everyone was puzzled. In Russian, written with the Cyrillic, but it's Mopnaya. And no, it's from the word mop, like to mop, to clean the floor. So для уборщиков, комната для уборщиков, I don't know. So the language is becoming more and more inventive.
Well, yeah, among other things, if you really have an opportunity to spend time talking about this in class, or maybe this could be an extracurricular activity that could talk about, whether it's linguistic imperialism or cultural imperialism. It's a fruitful topic to talk about it. Or this is what always happens in languages around the world. Russian's not the only one. There is a fascinating topic of world Englishes. There is research on that. The dukhless поколение, this word play that happens between English and Russian, and this is this is how Russians do this, and now you can do this too. You can combine the two things. Like my favorite one is partisan. Partisan. A person who loves going to parties. Yeah, so yeah, it's a fruitful topic. Again, this is something else. This is maybe not in our classroom because we usually don't have time for these niceties, but as an extracurricular activity, it's a wonderful topic.
Can I, Connie, I see a question. Can I just thank everyone? And I know some of you have to leave, so don't feel bad for leaving. But if you want to stay, please stay and we can talk a little more. But thank you so much for joining us, and good luck to you in the spring semester. I hope we'll see each other face to face very soon.
And good seeing so many familiar faces, and nice welcome to unfamiliar faces. And please come to the second webinar in this series.
On Friday, 4 p.m. Yeah, thank you. All right, so Connie, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks very much. And may I think in everybody's on behalf of everybody, thank you for a really inspiring and fantastic a presentation. A lot of food for thought. And I just wanted to probably comment slightly on the notion of using authentic texts at the novice level, and which is what I used to be teaching. And for us, it was essential to use authentic materials. I think it's actually not as difficult as it may seem. There's plenty of material that lends itself. And I don't want to bore the congregation, so to speak, with examples here, but as it depends on how long the conversation goes on. But I just wanted to add that for me, the whole point about authenticity in the language classroom, and that every bit of language that is used actually has meaning. Students create meaning for themselves. Also, then means that it's not just about introducing students to those materials, to illustrate a point, to show a pattern, etc., but also to teach them, to encourage them to go and seek out authentic language themselves. And we used to do that. So I just give an example on this one. So one way we used to do this was by actually introducing them to reading the news. Google or Yandex actually, reading news headlines and just the first, the paragraph, and because which lent itself, at the end of the first year, obviously, but lends itself because lots of cognates, they're already familiar with this contents, if they can spot this is about this topic, and a little bit of teaching has to be done on that. But anyway, so the point is, it's not just for us to introduce this language, but also for them to inspire them to go out and find those examples themselves. And at the later stages as well, I remember how when I was a student in Russia, one of our lecturers used to say always, "And what did you read on the fences today?" Or in the toilet, the toilet doors, perhaps, and that kind of stuff, So I think that's very, very important. And the realization that language is actually everywhere.
Right. Language autonomy is that's what we're all striving for. And we never know which thing will выстрелит. So I, for example, assigned one series of one episode of Kuchnia. Yeah, I know some students like it. I mean, I'm not crazy about it. I don't like the jokes, but one of my students watched the whole thing, all the episodes of every season. So he got so hooked on this Kuchnia. So he spent, his whole winter break watching Kuchnia. So we never know which thing, is it Mandelstam that's gonna get them, or Kuchnia, or Zvyagintsev, or Chekhov, right? So if we use the variety of resources, not just, again, top shelf and elite writers, all these white men poems and stories, well, there's a chance we will target various interests and various modalities.
I also use a lot, but it's been already said, I use a lot of photographs of those fences and buildings and everything with signs on it. And there are I make these photographs myself, of course, when I go to Russia, or I save a lot of them just from Facebook, because people do post them all the time. And there is a special group on Facebook called something like Надписи на стенах, like 50% of those надписи на стенах is impossible to use in classroom because of the obscene language, but 50% you can use. Sometimes there are funny ones. So, and that's because it's so difficult to find something for the beginners. And those little, like phrases, one or two short phrases can work also. Also, when there are protests in Russia, there is a lot of excellent slogans. People are holding those slogans, and I have a ton of these, photographs saved from the Russian protests of the recent. This absurdist, this what is it called? It's in Novosibirsk, in Siberia, someplace.
The Monstratsia?
Monstratsia, right? From Monstratsias are perfect. And this is evergreen because they are not, connected to any special calendar date, but and they're very funny sometimes. And they are people of students' age, which is also important. They see their counterparts in Russia, same age people with those very funny slogans.
Yeah, lots of language game, lots of language play. Those posters, you're right. Anything else? I see requests for Kuchnia. Yeah, I just Google might be the fastest, Olga, fastest way. And I know on 3 years link, right? You guys have maybe have a episode or excerpt from Kuchnia as well. But
yeah, some people put stuff. We started taking stuff down for DMCA, which we've always respected. But yeah, I think there are probably some up there.
Not all of them are with Russian subtitles, though. The Kuchnia episodes, I mean, but
what level do you use Kuchnia for? For what level? Beginner?
Second year when we were doing Yeda. Yeah, that was either third semester or fourth semester.
Oh, okay.
And again, it was not very involved or active kind of a targeted work. It was more of a watch it as a just for fun. Anything else? Any other ideas, questions? Favorite resources?
Yes, people are ready for their dinner.
Yes, I think people are. Well, as usual, we'll share the recording and the slides to everybody who registers.
Right.
If you have further questions or would like to continue the conversation, please email us. You know where to find us. We'll be happy to continue this engagement.
And Karina, thank you for this resource. A new deaf, I didn't know about it. And I'm blanking on this website that somebody posted on C-Lang some time ago that has all the database of films that have subtitles and available. What is it? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I think I sent you.
I know there is a database. Maybe we're thinking about the same thing, but I won't.
Soviet Movies Online is great, Natasha. Thank you. But there's another free resource that just has links to films, not the films themselves. But
former ACTR student launches Russian movie streaming site. I thought that was.
What is it? What is it called?
I'm looking. The name of RussianFilmHub.com.
Russian Film Hub, right? Russian Film Hub. A wonderful resource. Yes. That's great. So if you type in Ironia Судьбы, it will give you all the platforms and all the links it's available on with subtitles, and you can choose which subtitles you want, English or Russian or other language, and we'll find somewhere Amazon Prime or YouTube or Hulu where this film is available.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much again, Irina and Evgeny. That was a wonderful presentation, right on time for us to get to get ready for the new semester. Oh, well, so thank you again. I really appreciate everyone for coming and for finding time.
Good luck if you're starting.
Yeah.
Stay warm.
Yeah,
До свидания.